Scott, I always love our conversations, even just connecting. Just it's so good.
Yeah.
But we've been working at this vector idea for, gosh, now it's a
10 years?
concept. It feels like it, um, and uh, and it's sometimes it's the simple things. It's the simple questions of like, hey, how are we describing vector to veterans,
Yeah.
to people that maybe have a son or daughter that's in the military and that
Mhm.
could find usefulness for it. What are some of the ways you describe what vector is?
Usually poorly. I'll say things that are like for real buzzwords and concepts like purpose and find clarity and self awareness. And I think I'm being clear when I say that because I've experienced it, I've tasted, I've seen it, but I think I realize what happens is typically when I share it like that conceptually, someone is like, "Oh, that sounds awesome." And then they walk away, and if that person were to describe what it actually is, it's like it's
It's
completely
lost.
gone. Yeah, I remember I heard this phrase once, when you're not clear speaking and communicating, what is it? If it's fog in the pulpit, it's mist in the pew, which essentially means like if it's fuzzy here, and I'm this is my confessional. I'm often very fuzzy about what vector is.
Yeah, yeah. What I love about the language that we've been adding to how we describe it now, and it's a message that I've heard a million times from veterans working with them.
Yeah,
We're in the room, right? And there's 40 special operators at the Honor
yeah,
Foundation. And there's this hand creeps up from a gentleman who served 30 something years because they're a crusty warrant officer.
uh-huh,
And they're like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
yeah,
And it's so funny because we had a conversation about that, and we're like, maybe we just start describing that because
yeah,
for some reason, I think even civilians, anybody would understand that concept of what do you want to be when you grow up,
yeah,
especially if you had a long career. Well, this happens even for people that are in industry and business that want a complete 180 career change. They've been a doctor for 30
hmm,
years and they've been in the ER and now they want to do a career change. They
yeah,
might even ask themselves, what I want to be when I
hmm,
grow up now that I want to do something. It's just
yeah,
it's like simple language sometimes is where it's at.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that connects viscerally. And I have learned that when someone is going through transition, whether that's a 17-year-old kid who's getting peppered with these questions about what are you going to do when you graduate, or someone transitioning for the military, there's just like there's a lot of competing voices, and there's a mixture of like what I should do, what people expect me to do, where the jobs are, what will make X, Y, and Z proud. So that's part of the confusion or the complexity. And I think the other part is inherent in transition is some danger, some risk, and
Mm.
it's I think for most people, it taps into some survival instincts, which means like, am I going to be okay? Or are we going to have enough? Whenever, whatever it is, enough time, enough money, and when that happens, the part of our brains that turns off is the thinking part. It's the part that helps see patterns and see things clearly and remember our values and principles. Like that actually gets shut off for a lot of folks when it's like I have to go interview or I have to go find a job, and another reason why when you ask what do you want to do when you grow up, a lot of people have a deer in the headlights look, because of the competing voices and the danger of maybe this doesn't work out the way I thought.
What you just described, what's really cool is we've learned a lot inside the Honor Foundation for 10 years, working with you, working with great organizations like Gallup and even Simon Sinek. And something that Simon writes is this concept of the brain and the limbic and the neocortex and how our thoughts and our fight or flight kind of reactions come from. And you're right, the neocortex, the outer part where language resides and where logic resides. I need a job. I need a
Yeah,
salary. It's what makes sense, right?
yeah,
But the limbic brain, that's the feelings and emotions which we a lot of times suppress. We push down
uh-huh.
because who cares? Suck it up and just
Right,
just get a job. Just get a
right,
job. Just pick.
yeah,
But if we suppress that too much, we don't really understand our true desire to contribute to the world. And
yeah,
and and unfortunately, if we let the external need override that
mhm,
internal need, we might choose the wrong team. We might
yeah,
choose the wrong
right,
the wrong organization And yes, and then we have what's called the golden handcuffs, right? We've talked
Yeah.
about that in the past where,
Yeah.
shoot, I have this amazing salary now and we have this great lifestyle, but I'm miserable for a third of my life. But
Yeah.
you know what? Oh, well, hey, I'm just going to live on my neocortex brain.
Yeah. So when people ask what is inside Vector, I've learned to kind of break it down even more clearly. One side of it's these abstract concepts, but really, if you were to click on start the program, what you would see on your computer screen or on your phone would be a bunch of chapters, 10 chapters. And inside every chapter, there's a video. And in that video, it's probably you and me and a couple other people.
Yeah.
And we're explaining why this particular area of your life is really important to look at. And then we're actually showing you what it looks like to do that from our lives, from our experience. And that's a bulk of it. And then the next part is, so what do you think? And that's where literally in the course, it's to look at a workbook with open-ended questions and pick up a pen or type and start actually processing and reflecting and journaling your thoughts. And so videos, journaling, and then the third part is talking out loud. And there's a couple of ways to do that. One is finding an advisor, someone that you trust, that you can text at the beginning of the program and say, hey, dude, I'm going to go through this thing to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. Do you mind if we meet up a couple times as I go through this over the next month and just share some stuff out loud? Maybe even read what I'm writing. And 99 out of 100 times, that person who gets that text says, yeah, sure, of course, happy to. And if you then go and do it, then you might have it on a Zoom. You might meet up at a coffee shop or a bar or on a walk and just say, all right, let me just kind of process this stuff out loud. And something happens. And that sounds like I'm being conceptual again. Clarity comes when you go through that process of watching someone else talk and share, doing your own thinking by writing or by typing, and then talking out loud. And with 10 chapters, and you just kind of see this lapse around the track, there's different perspectives, different angles. And by the end of it, you're able to answer these questions very clearly. Who are you? What's most important to you? What do you value? What do you want to do next? Who are the people around you? And when you have clarity to those questions, a lot of that limbic stuff turns off and a lot of the good stuff turns back on.
It is literally the algorithm. Like
Yeah.
we've tested it for 10 years inside the Honor Foundation. Yeah. I remember going through the Honor Foundation, having the same process, the same questions, and then journaling, so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then the first conversation was with my wife, who was so perplexed, like, why are you talking so much? You've never said this much in your entire life, Joe.
Yeah.
So that was then, and now she can't shut me up, right? But that is the algorithm. It's watch this content, and the reason why we know this works is like because we've been there and done that. We've witnessed it hundreds of times with different people from different walks of life, and it works, and it's pretty remarkable. And what's neat is you and I have been talking recently about like, hey, because there's a lot of people that go to the Honor Foundation and even go to Vector.
Yeah.
And there's some that maybe they just kind of dip their toe in the water and they're not maybe fully immersed into it. They see the value and they're like, wow, this is actually different.
They love the concepts. Like, yeah, sure, cool. Yeah, I need to figure out what I want to do.
They're like, I kind of get it, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if I fully believe, right?
Yeah.
And so I understand that.
Yeah.
But then there's folks that just go all in, like deep end.
Yeah.
They're doing cannonball flips into it. And
what is it about those people? What have you noticed?
There's three things specifically, and I've thought about it for years, and then I heard one of the greatest, or at least self-renowned, or I don't know, self-proclaimed executive coach in the world, Marshall Goldsmith. He talks about these three things for successful people, and I realized those same three things apply to successful graduates of Vector. And it's so simple, but when applied, man, it works. So the first thing is humility. And first of all, I want to get your definition of humility. Like
Yeah.
when I say humility, like what do you think? What comes to mind?
Yeah, there's at first there's a sort of a maybe negative connotation of like
Yeah, yeah,
I've done something wrong, confessional, um, contrite, like been humbled. I think is like I think of that like I've been humbled. My humanity has popped out and I got caught.
right. Head down, kicking
Yeah,
the dirt.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know that does kind of come to mind, I think, and that's probably a Western
uh-huh.
perspective of humility.
Yes,
I'd be kind of curious what it is like for the rest of the world.
yeah,
But uh, in the way I look at it and the way it's been defined for success for vector folks, it's just realizing that something's missing in my own plan to move forward.
yeah,
And in this case, it's career transition.
yeah.
So they might be thinking of the checklist of write a resume,
Hmm.
uh, go to the job fair, build a LinkedIn profile,
Yeah.
build a Facebook profile, start being, look on Indeed and all that. That's the
Mhm.
checklist. But there's a sense that, man, I sound weird when I talk to civilians. I get nervous
Yeah.
and I'm kind of shaky my voice. I start
Uh-huh.
sweating. My palms are like, I sound like Eminem right now
Yeah.
with the lyrics. Palms are sweaty. But it's this sense like, dang, something's missing. I'm not quite there. I need to
Yeah.
work on something, right? So it's a sense of humility.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is courage, which the courage comes in the form of asking for help.
Yeah.
And so it could be, honey, I'm nervous about transitioning,
Hmm.
right? And so that's a sign of asking for help, of letting somebody know in a, something's missing. I'm
Yeah.
nervous. How do I
Yeah.
cross this bridge? Vector is that source of help.
Yeah.
When you click yes, take the quiz,
Uh-huh.
you've just went through the first two stages of
That's
humility.
true.
I don't know what I don't know. And courage, click yes, take this
Yeah.
quiz and get some feedback.
Yeah. In that, I think the courage part, I remember when I would first go into THF, maybe even before you were there, I would put people on the spot on the first night and say, tell me about yourself. We're just going to go around and do introductions. And as an introvert, I hate that. I truly hate introducing myself. It's gone poorly every single time my entire life. But what I would find is that would actually help prove the point that you ought to be humble if you're not, because it didn't go well. Never does that really go well. When I'm talking to a veteran in transition and they haven't gone through this process yet, and I say, tell me about yourself. But by the end of it, it's pretty simple to be like, yo, you know, we both know that didn't go well. And in addition to that, then to be able to like actually reach out to people as we're talking about cups of coffee, as we're asking an advisor to come into my life, I feel this as well. I don't want to do that because I don't want to. I don't know. I don't want to monopolize someone's time. I don't want to be needy. I don't want
Right.
to bother somebody. I don't want people to think that I think I'm the center of the universe. Like there's just a variety of reasons why I don't want to do it. So it does actually take courage to trust that when I ask, I won't be perceived that way. When I start
Mm-hmm.
talking about myself out loud, that someone won't rush to give me advice or tell me it's going to be okay. Like all this stuff I don't need. So
Right.
it actually requires courage in addition to humility just to put myself out there.
100%. One of the questions on the intake to get into the Honor Foundation is, how are you with asking for help?
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. I used to love that interview question, and I'm sitting across the table from another veteran who's trying to get in the Honor Foundation, and they're like, "Oh, I like to solve problems myself. I like to,
Sure.
get out." Of course you do.
Yeah.
I know, because I was the same person.
Yeah.
I think the same way. Um, and then the more we start talking, they realize I'm actually coming to the Honor Foundation for help, or in this case, I'm
Yeah.
coming to Vector for help
Yeah.
because there's something that's needed, and I don't have it.
Yeah.
And so that humility and the courage. And then the third thing, Scott, which it basically separates successful people with not so successful people.
Hmm.
And it's the tough one, right? So it's not motivation, because a lot of people are motivated to go run a marathon or go
Yeah.
get an advanced degree or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like get a cool tattoo. Like, oh man, I'm so hyped. Um, it's the discipline. It's the discipline. And discipline is doing the things that are gonna be tough, that are hard,
Yeah.
that are sometimes very much unpleasant,
Yeah.
but you do it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why do you do it? Well, like, why are you doing something that's maybe physically unpleasant, mentally unpleasant, but
Mhm.
you keep doing it intentionally? And it's because you know it's good at the end.
That's so good.
The-
And people will start the Honor Foundation, and we know they will start Vector and not stick with it. And I remember there's a guy, we're still friends. He, I think, was in your cohort, your
Mhm,
group with THF, and he dropped out, or at least we didn't see him much. And it
right.
turned out he got a job. So that's a great reason. He was
Good
like, all
reason.
right, I was here for a job, I got a job, so I'm gonna kind of short circuit the rest of this self discovery. But that's the only one I could think of where that's happened. Everyone else pulls back and maybe stops logging in because, to your point, it gets hard. And it's hard. You might be motivated up front in a moment of like panic or recognized helplessness. I need some help. But it's actually hard work and it requires brain calories. And you don't just do
Hmm.
it once. You don't just journal once and think all of life's questions are going to be answered. I think that's what most of us do think that, and it doesn't happen. It requires multiple laps around the track. It requires multiple conversations. And in fact, how many cups of coffee do you recommend?
50.
50. I mean, like 5 cups of coffee is actually a lot of cups of coffee.
Yeah.
10 is a lot. 20 is a lot of meetings and conversations. But when you
Yes.
talk about 50, I don't think you're being hyperbolic. I don't think you're being exaggerating. I think
Hmm.
you're actually mean. It takes that many times. It takes that much discipline. Having similar conversations with different people over and over and over again, picking up the pen to the same question you thought you answered 2 weeks ago and giving it another shot. Like that is a unique individual who's willing to put in that discipline. But if you do, what happens?
It's incredible. We call it transformation. It's a perspective. So what happens typically in these conversations too is you don't know what you don't know. You've raised your hand saying, "Hey, I'm going to be humble here. I don't know what I don't know. I'm going to go log into Vector. I'm going to make that courageous move, step into it,
Yeah.
start doing the work, watching the videos, being disciplined, fill it out." Scott and Joe are saying, "Keep writing, keep
Mhm.
writing." Oh man, now I need to reach out to people.
Yeah.
Again, an act of courage. You're taking a high risk move.
Yeah.
Um, when you think about it, it's not really that risky because
It's true.
these are people just like you and I,
Yeah.
and you kind of get over that fear the more cups of coffee you have. Right, the first ones I get though nerve wracking.
Yeah.
My first were nerve wracking as well. And then this is what happens in those cups of coffee. Uh, Potential opportunities that you didn't know existed
Mm.
for your future.
Yeah.
And it is not necessarily tied to just industry,
Yeah.
but it's also groups and collective groups of teams and cultures
Yeah.
and locations and just
Yeah.
all of it. And so through cups of coffee, one of my cups of coffee, if you want to call it that, because my definition of cup of coffee is a new conversation with somebody I've
Uh-huh.
never had before. That's the definition of a cup of coffee. And sometimes there is a cup of coffee because you meet them in person, but sometimes it's just a back and forth question about, hey, your job, what is it you do? What is it
Mhm.
that excites you? How did you land in
Mhm.
that job? And then just with curiosity, you're gathering intelligence and you're figuring out, wow, okay, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Um, the aperture starts opening up of possibilities. And it might even seem overwhelming at some point, especially when you get to cup of coffee number 20. You're
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, I think I can do anything in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
It starts getting that way. But what am I going to do now? Okay, here's a really good problem to have is what are
Yeah.
you going to choose to do?
Yeah.
So then you have more cups of coffee in more specific areas that are targeted. Now it's like, okay, all these industries or potential ways to go or pathways for success, whatever
Yeah.
success looks like for you, um, some of these things don't pertain to me. I don't think, that doesn't feel right because I've done this deep work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's good for other people, just not me. But these other options, these other possibilities, I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna keep going down that rabbit hole
Yeah.
and see what happens. And then the aperture starts to close in and get really crystal clear.
Right.
And then conversations start getting more richer, more engaging, more memorable.
Yeah. That's
And
right.
your language, you don't even realize it. You're sounding very intelligent
Yeah.
because you're more aware and in tune with those things that interest you. And
Yeah.
it's more aligned, and because the limbic brain is now matching the neocortex.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned the transition readiness quiz. That is to kind of gauge your humility and courage.
Mm-hmm.
What you're reminding me of is maybe like the transition discipline quiz. Like, let's check in with people halfway through, because I've never thought about this before. But if your cups of coffee are still awkward, confusing, overwhelming, uncomfortable, like just a drag, then you have not done it enough, because it does get, I mean, you'll always have some weird nuts there, but it will get clear. You'll feel like you're actually seeing patterns and connections that are being made, even if this is a brand new person. But if you keep doing it, so that's the transition discipline quiz. Have you been doing it enough where when you journal, there actually is like insight? Have you had enough cups of coffee where it actually starts to make sense and you start to see things, and you can start almost like seeing things conceptually as you're talking about where things fit and how you fit into that? So I know you are quoting someone else, but since you told me about humility, courage, and discipline, I've probably 20 times been like, my friend Joe Lara actually says that what's required. So I'm quoting you from now on. I don't care where you got it. Your source document to me.
I'm pretty much convinced there's nothing original under the sun. We're just
Yeah,
quoting somebody else, but
that's true.
whatever. But
So you're getting
yeah.
in this conversation, so we're wrapping up. What is Vector? Well, it's watching videos, it's doing some writing and thinking, and it's talking. That's it. And it happens to be a self-guided thing. It ought to take you about a month. But the real ingredients are what Joe's talking about. Have the humility to know that you need help. Have the courage to step into these uncomfortable, awkward things. And then by all means, have the discipline to keep going until you get to clarity, and transformation will come. I'm a product of it. You're a product of it. And the people that do it and do it those three ingredients, I mean, we do see breakthroughs. We do see transformation. And
those
that's
conversations, conversations are awesome. Talking to those folks who've done the work, and you could tell they're driving. They're not just,
waiting for
aimlessly.
something to happen.
No, they're not sitting there in the corner waiting. No, they're actually moving forward.
Yeah.
And there's a sense of confidence, which is all measured in that initial quiz.
Yeah.
And now they score high. So it's pretty cool. Really cool.
All right. So this was your pitch. If you're listening, you're watching. This was for you. We recorded this for you. Okay. So vectoraccelerator.org, take the quiz, start the course, and we'll see if you've got what it takes to get that transformation you're looking for.